John, great to see you. Thanks for joining the call this morning with me.
Yeah, thanks, Martin.
I've been really excited to dig into AI and its impact on teams and performance of people. You've been writing some interesting stuff. You've obviously got a very strong business psychology background, certainly well qualified in that space. And you've recently put out a very good, solid ebook around the 7 skills to build resilience. And I'm feeling like resilience is quite important where we're at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for that. I agree. Across my business overall, I started a business called Confident Performance a year ago on the basis that in reality, that's what it's all about. Whether individuals in a team, people in a relationship, consultants trying to generate business or leading business teams in larger entities, we can often go back too far to try and find what the problems are. And then in the spirit of positive psychology, I think leveraging what we're good at is particularly important. And that's one of the key skills for resilience, for example, which is why I threw that guide together.
So, look, AI is obviously dominating the boardroom conversations right now. Most of that discussion is around technology, productivity. There's a lot of experimentation. From your perspective, what's happening to the human side of performance as AI becomes more embedded in the workplace?
It's an interesting one. It's almost the catch 22, I guess, in the spirit of Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there. And in a society where technology is supposedly connecting us more than ever to information, people, and so on, it's almost having a deleterious effect in that it's creating a fragmented workplace. It's creating arguably too much information. And we've all worked for leaders where less was more. So you'd work for somebody who would simply say, how are you going? This is our plan. This is all we need to achieve in the short term. And they were the people that we liked working with. And I think the technology is not necessarily the problem when it really is, as you mentioned, around human performance. But AI is accelerating the pace of business. And interestingly, the folks at the top of business, whether it's small, medium, or large, at times are already running on empty and struggling, feeling more isolated. They're now carrying everything on their shoulders and so on. And AI is almost like an information tsunami. It's not necessarily simplifying things, and the executives that will thrive are those that will invest in human performance.
We talk about tools there looking to lead to better outcomes, but does it actually improve the performance, or does it risk eroding the confidence and independent thinking in the leaders and teams?
A bit of both. The technology used well can improve output quality and efficiency and so on. But there's also a risk of capability creep in that we're all quite convinced that what we write makes sense. And then if we use AI to enhance that, it can make it sound more impressive and so on, but it doesn't necessarily create outcomes and insights that are more clever or improve our judgment, for example. Lots of executives that I work with are highly capable, but they've been grinding for a long time and their confidence has quietly been eroded, if you like. AI can exacerbate that. It can create more of the same, repeat the same cycles of concern. It's a double-edged sword using AI.
It's informing more of our decisions. And you question what happens with that executive judgment. Is it strengthening decision making, or are we just trying to outsource it to AI?
I agree. And executive decision making is not just about information. It's also about how you engage teams, how you influence others, how you help people become more capable. We met in a company that specializes in information and research and so on. But we knew that there were clients that it doesn't matter how much information we gave them, they didn't necessarily become more capable because it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? The decision making is not just knowledge, but it's what do I do with the information? How do I engage others? How do I make sure that I'm not enhancing that sense of tension where I'm not great at mapping my business, my relationships, and my overall sense of self? And in terms of that cognitive load, the things that really make executives successful and effective are things like judgment, a sense of creativity, emotional regulation, enabling others, building relationships. And we know that when pressure's unresolved, that executive performance zone, which is the sweet spot between business, your relationships, and yourself, when that's not positive or you're in a state of fight or flight as opposed to flow, then that impacts all three aspects: how I run the business, how I engage with people both inside and outside the business. So I work a lot with business leaders around that sense of they feel like personal tension to business flow to help relieve that angst.
What about authenticity? How does the leader maintain authenticity throughout that?
It's working with individuals or leaders of teams or even advising some companies around authenticity. There's nothing better than a family business with a really tried and tested brand story. And I think that authenticity has never been more valuable or tested. So when AI can create a product, a brand positioning really quickly, that can lead us to communicating with clients or teams in a way that aren't necessarily authentic with what we're running our business. When I work with clients, whether it's as a psychologist or in business or whatever, when we get that pit in the stomach where there's a slight sense of anxiety whenever we're working, that's often where there's a misalignment between our values as a person and as a business, which then is linked to how we behave as individuals. AI is one of the challenges we have in the business world at the moment with so much external advice. It's really important to take a step back at times and just observe what it is we're doing, who we're doing it with, and what it is that we're intending.
So if you're advising a senior executive team today, what are the core human capabilities they need to develop to remain effective in an AI-driven organization?
There's a couple of ways to look at it, and I work with executives around what I call the executive performance pathway. In essence, the first part of that is around growth tension. One of the things that we tend to do when we're overusing technology to improve our organization is to let the technology drive us forward as opposed to being open to continuing to develop ourselves. There can be an over-dependence on the technology rather than the people running the business. One of the first things I help them address is that growth tension, which is to ensure the leaders are open to continuing to develop themselves. The other part is making sure there's a balance between how we run the business, how we build relationships, and then a little bit around self-care and self-identity. I work with founders and their self-identity is wrapped in the business completely, right? After them, name the business after themselves and so on. So they're in it, but also their families are locked into the business in that sense as well. It's particularly important to make sure that there's that balance between focus on the business. I talk about customers, business partners. You and I are both building businesses and we have partnerships here and partnerships there and doing some things ourselves. And that relationship part is particularly important because with most things in business as leaders, when things go wrong, we're not trying to do things poorly. It's often a classic case of not what you do, but the way that you do it. The way we go about being authentic leaders is often linked to how we feel about ourselves, our relationships, and so on. The third part is around leadership alignment, which is making sure that leaders still have an understanding of their leadership style, the styles of their teams, a sense of emotional intelligence. What is it that we can do with each other to become more resilient in the moment, which is not having a better mission, vision. It's not a conference. It's one-on-one. And this is tough post-COVID, right? The business world is being set up so that people are not spending time with each other.
I feel it's that face-to-face interaction. That's the most powerful thing still. We've got to get back to that in some sense because we've got too much into the computers and the technology and AI. The human piece needs to come back into it somehow.
Yes, and that requires more than ever an element of intentionality around that. It used to be when we all worked in the office, we'd just go for coffee, like you just go, right, we're all going for coffee. Now we're in different suburbs, different cities, at times different countries. There will need to be some quite clever planning. We are somewhat disparate in terms of our work locations and setups. It'd be particularly important to ensure that teams can perform independently. Most leaders are driven, and driven people can't help themselves but get in the way. The organization and executives who will thrive in the future will be those that have invested as deeply in human performance as they will in technology or AI capability. Technology levels the playing field. It might bring some businesses closer to their competitors, but the differentiation will still be pretty much entirely human. Making sure leaders are strategically confident as opposed to ongoing, exhausted and full attention. More than ever, it's a golden opportunity to enable that balance between personal, family and work. You can see a maturing of organizations where we've got no choice now but to embrace working from home. We've got to do it. But I can see a really simple shift if we just accept that. and say, you know what, you're working from home, you do good work, I taught you well, good on us. It's that sense of executive flow state where, yes, we can observe challenges and try and fix them, but we can step back. It's really important to reflect on what's working.
John, I feel we should wrap up with your ebook again because I just find it such a powerful thing. 7 skills and building resilience. I think this is the time for people to dig into that. What's your intention for the digital book?
It's a really interesting one. My commercial head says, turn it into the world's best self-help app and we can all retire early. But I've got an aversion to self-help apps, to be honest. We can Google all these things, right? We can Google how to be a good leader. We can search for how to become happier. I was in Claude one night and I thought it might make a tool, a resilient performance compass to go hand in hand with the ebook so people can have a really pragmatic way just to review their circumstance and see how their sense of community is going, how their relationships are going, how they're going with themselves. Are they exercising? I would love for as many people to have access to that as possible.
That sounds great. Look, thanks very much for your time today, John. Some incredible insights around organizations, people, teams, and trying to get that shift in place. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure. It was great to chat, and it's a fascinating topic.